Hi, I'm Marie Plunkett, and my project is Menander's Arbitration, Making Ancient Greek Accessible. The goal of this project was to document the process of annotating, translating, producing, and performing a modern production of Menander's Arbitration. Menander was a 4th century Athenian playwright and the progenitor of New Comedy. New Comedy differs a little bit from Old Comedy. Old Comedy typically had more innuendos, dick jokes, crass humor, whereas New Comedy sticks more to tropes, like sitcom tropes where you have siblings revealed or abandoned babies reunited with their parents and raised as full Athenian citizens and happily ever afters. The Arbitration specifically is a fragmentary play. Only about half the play survives today, but the fragments we do have follow this newlywed couple, Charisios and Pamphila, through some marital troubles. Pamphila had a baby 5 months into their marriage, which makes Charisios think she's been unfaithful. Chaos ensues. But then, plot twist, it's revealed that Charisios is actually the father of the baby. He'd raped Pamphila at a festival prior to their marriage. And then we're missing the end of the play script, but we assume that it would have been happily ever after, the couples reunited and the baby's raised by both of its parents. So this project took on 3 stages. The initial stage was just Greek translation, translating Greek into English over and over again, understanding the grammar, the vocab, different references to Greek festivals or Greek jobs, things like that. And that resulted in the Intermediate Greek Reader, which is modeled on the Dickinson College commentaries. We do assume that students using this reader would have a basis and understanding of Greek grammar, but it does have the grammar and vocabulary help to assist in any problems that might arise during the translation. After the initial phase, we started working on the play script. So this required further research and revisions to the initial translations. And eventually we got this really fun play script, which I think really encompasses Menander's unique voice in as many ways as possible. And then finally, the culmination of the first 2 phases is the performance on April 11th. And we actually did a full performance of the fragments we have left at the Greek Theater at LSU with masks and costumes. LSU students and 1 faculty member made up our cast. And then the research, we did a lot of research for this. Initially, it was prior translations, making sure we understood how previous scholars had understood and wrote about the play and translated it. We did use a lot of translations, but the top 3 that we used were Arnott, Miller, and Baum. Arnott was probably the most helpful initially. He has a very literal Loeb translation. He doesn't try to fill in the lacunas or do anything fancy. He's very straightforward and very clear about what he's doing. Next, we have Trail. Trail was very influential in this project. She writes about female characters in Menander's plays, and specifically for the arbitration, it was helpful to understand the dynamics between the female characters and also the female characters and the male characters, because we have a wife and a daughter, Pamphila, who has to interact with her husband and her father, but also a courtesan who has to interact with the males around her and also the guy that she's been hired by. Which are very interesting dynamics to understand in ancient terms as well as in modern terms, and a little bit problematic. And then finally, we have Amy Cohen and Tim Woodrich, who are professional models for staging the play. Amy Cohen works with original practice. She does the full face masks in the ancient style, and Tim Woodrich does fragmentary performances. So we modeled our play off of theirs, and with Tim Woodrich, his whole idea is that fragmentary plays should be performed and utilized in their original context, because we don't throw out broken statues or smashed vases or damaged paintings. We learn from them, we put them in museums, we study them. And why not do the same for a fragmentary play? I mean, we can read them all we want, but it's not really the full experience unless we watch them and perform them and interact with them in the way that they're meant to be interacted with. So translating the play, there are a lot of lacunas, so missing pieces, and also footnotes are a must. You have to have footnotes in order to understand the intricacies of the play, the different festivals, and the different characters have different jobs and they speak in different dialects. And it's really hard to understand exactly what's going on unless you have that backup information. So for the reader, we could incorporate footnotes or notes in the grammar section, but for the play script, we had to incorporate all of that into the translation, which I think we did pretty well. But we had to also figure out how to perform a fragmentary play. We reinserted a character who doesn't have a lot of lines as this kind of narrator character who can take off his mask and tell the audience like, hey, we're missing a piece here. We're skipping ahead to this act. And then again, with character voices, Menander has very unique voices for every single one of his characters, which is so incredible to read in the Greek, but turning that into English is a little bit difficult. So we had to come up with crazy accents or different speech patterns to kind of imitate that same pattern that Menander has. I'll spare you a lot of this, but preparing for a performance is very tiresome and very detailed. And we had to go through the full theater process, auditions, casting, rehearsals, coming up with costumes, designing the set, figuring out how to perform in a live space with no microphones and terrible acoustics. And the School of Theater was very helpful with that, of course. We stole a lot of their students for our cast members, but it was a very long and arduous process. And now for the fun part, the pictures. So Menander's plays actually have probably more visual evidence than fragments left. This one is a mosaic showing the arbitration scene where they find the baby and they get the old angry father Smicranes to decide between the two guys who's going to get to keep and raise the baby. So we use this one as kind of our model for costuming and things like that. We wanted to get that same feel without having to do the full face mask. So we have smaller face masks that are both CDC approved and cute. And we worked with the Greek Theater at LSU. We're very fortunate to have this space outdoors, which is both COVID safe and, very apropos for the project. And here we have two of our actors. You can see Joseph Bemis on the ground there as Onesimus and Sebamir as both Chrysios on the left and Pamphila on the right. She was actually double cast as both husband and wife, which was really interesting. Had we had the full play script, we probably couldn't have done that. But because of the fragmentary nature, we were actually able to come up with this really cool dynamic between the two, as they're not seen in any scenes together in the surviving fragments. And here we have Joseph Bemis again and Bernadette Clark, our Onesimus and our Hebrotenon. They have this really cool scene in Act 3 where they plot to figure out if Chrysios really is the father, and they get to command the entire huge stage, just the two of them. And they did a really great job of utilizing space and acoustics and body language because you can't see their faces. And so they used body language to convey emotions and the different things. And it's a really cool scene. It turned out very well. And then we have this example of a costume and some props. So Daos was our shepherd, and he had little sheep on his mask, and he wore plaid and overalls and tried to kind of give off the air of someone who worked out in the country. And here we have the trinkets, which were left with the abandoned baby. And we tried to make them as exaggerated and hysterical as we could. Just like, this is supposed to just scream, this is funny, you should be laughing right now, it's not serious. It is a topic that you might think would be serious. And abandoning a baby in the woods is definitely not go-to behavior, but it's humorous in this context. It's supposed to be funny. So we really tried to convey that to a modern audience by using these outlandish items, a rubber chicken and a piñata, things that you definitely wouldn't leave with an exposed child in the woods. So in conclusion, this project really has convinced me that working with fragmentary ancient plays isn't just possible, but it's actually beneficial to understanding ancient theater culture and making classics accessible. Performing these ancient plays makes these plays accessible to modern audiences that might not sit down to read them, but it puts them back in their original context when they can be enjoyed by everyone in the audience. And it also helped us as scholars figure out how they originally would have been perceived, and it brings out different things in performance that you don't necessarily get off the page. So I definitely encourage future scholars to pay more attention to the fragmentary plays and to go through the process of translating them and performing them. It's absolutely worth it. Thank you.